Okay, well, welcome everyone. Happy Friday. Happy August. We are now about to begin. It's 3:01 and let's open and begin the executive board meeting of the Cities Association of Santa Clara County. If we can just do roll. Auden, do you mind calling roll for us today?
Yes. Syak,
Yes, here.
present. Jones.
Present.
Jones present. Abakoga.
Here.
Abakoga present. Flagger is absent. Constantine is absent. And Klein.
Present.
Klein is present. And with 4 members present, we have a quorum.
Thank you. And so on our agenda to begin with, we'll start with our consent agenda. I have 3 items there. And so board members, would anyone like to pull anything from consent?
So hold on a second. I think I have Nisa here.
Yeah, she said she's in as an
Yep,
attendee.
I'm moved. Nisa, is that you?
It is. Thanks, Andy.
Okay, great. I will rename you as well.
Thank you for joining us, Nisa. We just did roll call. We'll reflect that you are now with us. And I've opened our consent agenda and asked if there's anyone that would like to pull anything from consent. So I see
Great.
no.
Thanks, Marika.
I'm sorry, what?
I think she just said thank you.
Okay. And so I don't see any hands raised. I'm going to open it up to our public to see if there's anyone that would like to pull anything from consent or would like to actually, let's take that back, make public comments on our consent agenda. And so I see Mary Lynn Bernald. And Mary Lynn, if we could just hold on and welcome Rich to our board meeting. Hi, Rich.
I hear recording in progress, so that means I just made it.
You just made it. We went through roll call. We'll reflect that you're with us.
Thank
We
you.
opened consent agenda. No one asked to pull anything, and we're now taking comments on consent. And if we can have Mary Lynn speak, welcome.
Okay. Mary Lynn Bernald, you're being unmuted and you have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Mary Lynn Bernald, Chair of the SCSC Roundtable. I'm talking about the consent item that is asking for reimbursement for payment to be made for Gary Baum. I'm hoping that maybe that will wrap around into item number 3 of today's calendar agenda because I would like to understand an opportunity to review what the charges are for and review before the roundtable is asked to pay.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other speakers? Okay, I see no other speakers. And so I am going to close public comment on our consent, go back to our executive board, see would anyone like to pull any of the 3 items? And if not, a motion or comment on consent.
Yes, so I would like to move to accept the consent calendar, but move Gary's invoice to the roundtable item on the agenda.
Okay, so then we have 1A, 1B, 1C, 1C1, 1C2.
That's correct.
Okay, so we have a motion. Would anyone like to second it?
I'll second that.
Okay, a motion by Larry. And so
Just point of order, wouldn't the CASCC bill still be included in the consent item?
Yes, it would. Good
Oh,
catch,
yes.
Gary.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that, Gary. Yes,
Glad we have a lawyer on the case.
I know. Thank you.
So only the SCSC roundtable invoice.
Great. Okay, Auden, would you like to call the question?
Yes, and just another point of clarification, I don't believe we have 1B, the financial statements prepared for this call. And is
Okay.
that Andy?
Andy, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yes, correct. Nisa and I haven't had a chance to go over that together, so I didn't add it to so please remove that. Thank you. Sorry about that.
So part of my motion is to remove 1B.
Okay, just a minute. We're all on the same page. We have 1A, 1C1, 1C2, 1C3, which only includes I'm sorry, the Gary Baum's CASCC bill.
That's correct.
Okay. Any other point of clarifications? Thank you, Auden. If you wouldn't mind calling the question.
Yes, and our second was from,
Larry?
Commissioners, Mayor Klein.
great, thank you. Flagger?
Yes.
Flagger, aye. Klein?
Yes.
Klein, aye. Jones?
Aye.
Jones, aye. Abakoga?
Aye.
Abakoga, aye. Sayok?
Aye.
Sayok, aye. And Constantine?
Aye.
Constantine, aye. And with 6 ayes, the motion carries.
Okay. And so we will move Gary's bill to the roundtable to items under consideration and wrap it around number 3. Okay, item number 2, consideration of future meetings, in person, hybrid, or virtual meetings. Andy, would you like to comment on this?
Andy, you're muted.
Well, I can't wait till we don't have to say that anymore.
So we wanted to have a conversation with you about future meetings in person or hybrid. And so Gary was kind enough to prepare this agenda item for us, and so that we can take it to the board. Gary, would you like to make any comments
Let me
about
give
this?
some few quick comments about it. We can continue to hold meetings over Zoom, but we'd have to follow certain rules, or we can revert back to in-person meetings. That would be at the discretion of the board. I just want to point out that if we wish to continue doing them under Zoom, we would be using the remote meeting of the telephonic meeting rules from the Brown Act, which refer to electronic meeting. The Brown Act obviously was written prior to the invention of Zoom, but it does envision meetings along these lines. However, there are a number of commitments or issues that we would need the board to understand and know that they have to follow if you're going to stay all remote. One of which is everything has to be roll call votes. I think that's what we do already. We have to post the agenda wherever the director is calling from. So if you're at a private residence or at a business, you'd have to post it on the door or at a hotel. The address that you're calling from would also have to be posted. So if you're concerned about using a personal address, that would be something to be aware of. We're going to have to place that on the agenda, and we would probably put it together a procedure where we'd ask you to inform Andy, say a week in advance, so that we could make sure to place that on the agenda. Wherever you're calling from has to be accessible to both the public, and it has to be ADA accessible. So if you live in a 2-story or 3-story home and you're on the 2nd story, you actually would have to be on the 1st story unless you had a ramp or an elevator. Also, if anyone knocks on the door and they wish to speak at the meeting at your private residence, that could also be an issue. We must have a quorum within our jurisdiction. Now, we're lucky because we're the Cities Association, so our jurisdiction is fairly large. But if you're either have a second home or you're on vacation in Tahoe, we still would have to have a quorum within the boundaries of the County of Santa Clara. So those are just some kind of caveats. You also should know, and it does not stay in the report, that we're going to be tracking legislation because there is some movement at the legislature on this, but it's not clear what will come out of that. So we're proceeding as if nothing's going to pass or nothing that's going to change this. But the governor's order will expire at the end of September, so we need to make the decision for October. I'm happy to respond to any questions if I'm able.
I have one last comment is that I did talk to the city of Sunnyvale where we would have our board meetings, and the city of Sunnyvale is open. Masking, of course, is required. And so if we decided to move back, so something for us to think about.
Thank you. Mayor Fliger?
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for that, Gary and Andy. Could you touch on the hybrid option? I saw the Zoom option and the back in person option, but I'm curious how the hybrid option would work.
There's not law on that right now, so that would be maybe a question for Andy. I guess what we would have to do is we'd have to have the normal meeting in person, and then this Zoom option. If one individual member wants to utilize Zoom, that would require the same telephonic rules that I just went through. If you want to have the members of the public call in over Zoom, that's a different question. I would defer to Andy because that's really just how do we do it technically.
So I think this is where we run into using our the OWL if we purchase an OWL, and I know that that Sunnyvale has purchased a few, but I don't think they've used them in the West Conference Room yet. I think that we may have a problem in the West Conference Room because the conference table is actually a little bit too large for the OWL. The OWL is meant for a little bit smaller, but the hybrid meeting, we'd still need to use Zoom. I also, one of the strange things is when we go back to in person, I'm not sure how live streaming will work for us anymore unless we're doing something hybrid. I haven't quite figured all of that out yet, but I'm sure that Auden can help me figure that out.
Thanks, Andy. So so the hybrid option would allow both for board members and members of the public to appear both in person and via Zoom.
Correct.
Councilmember Abikoga?
Thank you. So I guess I wasn't sure what the recommendations or requirements are. I know we would have to mask, but is there anything about the socially distancing? Are we allowed to ask if members of the public, well, actually even the members, if they're vaccinated or not? How does the rest of this all work to ensure that we are being safe if we come back?
I think we would probably follow the same protocols that the city of Sunnyvale is if they're starting to have live meetings, or, similarly Mountain View would be similar to what you do at your own jurisdictions. My understanding is that there is now, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a countywide mask mandate. So that would apply to anyone, including them at the meetings, speaking at the meetings, attending the meetings, and so on, or our members, or obviously people like myself or consultants or executive director. So as far as asking about vaccine status, I don't know that we're able to do that at this time. And I would defer to see how the cities are handling it before I spend time trying to research it much further, because I'm sure that all the cities are tackling that. I don't know that we could ask people their vaccine status.
I did get from the county, since I serve on a task force there,
Right.
Survey asking if we were or not. So could we do that, or have we done that?
So we have done that.
Okay.
Just so I have surveyed anyone who participates, a staff member, contractor, anybody who participates on any committee with us has been surveyed. And so I do have records because we're required to keep the vaccination records. So I can answer that on, I do know that information on, I don't think I should probably speak to it right now. But we do have that, but again, I can't do that with the public. So I can ask Sunnyvale, and then I will also ask, because what we also do, we would have our executive board meetings in Los Gatos. And so I would also want to know how Los Gatos is handling that as well. Larry, do you know how Sunnyvale's handling it?
Yeah, so we're not requiring as of yet. We did do a similar survey of all of our employees, and the vast majority have already gotten the vaccine. So a lot of them didn't respond, and this is an issue, of course, and so we're going back and doing another request for information from that standpoint. Right now, as far and Gary asked, well, what are we doing in Sunnyvale from our council meetings? We're actually talking about that in Tuesday night's meeting. So we're having a further discussion what we're doing for our councils and boards and commissions on Tuesday night. That being said, definitely, the mask mandate is in place, but City Hall is open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 p.m. as of this past Monday. So, we're monitoring, we're encouraging, and we're also offering testing to all of our employees. But as far as the meetings are concerned, we actually haven't made a final decision from a council or commission standpoint yet.
And Laurel, would you care to share what Los Gatos is doing?
Certainly. We are reopening all of our public counters on Monday, August 30th. This includes building, planning, etc. Our library is fully open and has been for quite some time. Our town council will be meeting in person on August 17th. Masks will be required by all participants, consistent with the public health order. By policy, we will continue to have a Zoom option for members of the public. And so we will continue in a hybrid manner, but all key staff and all council members are expected to be present in person. And we have a remote participation policy that outlines when council members can be absent. So we're ready to go live. We're ready to continue to live with this pandemic. Thank you.
Any questions before I open for public testimony? Okay, seeing none, I'll open to our public. Would anyone like to speak on this item? Seeing no hands raised, bring it back. We put this on the agenda to see if there was any strong feelings from our board. Personally, I'm quite content staying on Zoom. It's not as fun, but in my mind, I'd kind of like to see the cities practice at first. But I wanted to hear what other people's thoughts are before we brought this back for further discussion or decision. Vice Mayor Jones?
Yes, I actually concur. I'm very comfortable with continuing to do Zoom. Obviously, the hope is that the governor is going to extend, our ability to be able to have all Zoom meetings, which expires on September 30th. So keep your fingers crossed that he extends that. And then that they also change the law where we can have some type of hybrid meeting. On the flip side, I really enjoy meeting with all of you in person and spending time with you face to face, but I think this Zoom meeting format is really working out well. I do have some concerns about somebody sitting in my living room watching me as I'm in a Zoom meeting, but hey, that's just maybe part of the deal. So.
But I just want to clarify, Gary, that would only apply after October 1st, correct?
Correct.
If governor. So one option could be, if no one has strong feelings, is that we just table this discussion. And then if it looks like the governor is not going to extend it at our September meeting, we can revisit it and make a decision for October.
I would not anticipate the governor would extend the order. That's been kind of clear what their direction is, that we need to sort of figure this out ourselves after September 30th. But
Okay.
I guess we are looking to the legislature to see if there's anything coming out of them.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Mayor Fliger?
Thanks, Mayor. I think I'm on the opposite end of you and Vice Mayor Jones. I am more inclined to support the hybrid model, where the board members actually appear in person and maybe staff and members of the public are allowed to Zoom in if that's allowed. And so if we want to table the final decision, since it wouldn't go into effect until October, I'm comfortable doing that as well and supporting that. But I'm actually more inclined to support the hybrid model. And one of the reasons is exactly what the vice mayor said, that, you know, we would now have to be posting our different locations and people can show up because the law allows them to.
Good point. Well, again, let's hear from others. What are some preferences and thoughts? Mayor Klein.
Yes, and I also think, you know, I like the concept of a hybrid model. That being said, I do worry about the, you know, the posting, the remote posting. I think at this point we table this. I don't think it'll be done by looking at the way the legislature and the governor has been working over the last year. I don't think it'll be fixed by the first meeting in September. So I think that ultimately we should almost plan to have a final meeting in October. Final meeting at the end of September prior to our October meeting, assuming that the current model will expire at the beginning of October. I do think that that's, you know, the era where we're caught right now as far as will it expire, or conceivably what will happen. So I do think that that's an issue, and whether or not we can do that for the whole board meeting or just the executive board is also something we should consider. But I do like the hybrid model. I do think that having that option, as well as having, you know, option for our residents, but also, you know, having everybody in one room does make a difference.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts? And then ultimately a motion.
Okay, point of clarification. Actually, I'm not. I'm actually supportive of the hybrid model as well. And if we meet in person, having the public able to zoom in. I know that we had our first council meeting in San Jose. It went relatively smoothly, but we had 11 people working on trying to make it go smoothly. We don't have those resources here at the Cities Association, so I just want to give everybody a heads up that, you know, in concept, it's a great idea. Logistically, it could be challenging.
I agree. And we have in Los Gatos, we have our dry run next week. I was just commenting that we have our dry run, and we'll see how, we'll report back how our August 17 meeting goes. Mayor Constantine?
I move that we table this until next month's meeting.
Okay, can I have a second?
Second.
Okay, an audit?
And the second was by
me.
By Jones.
By Vice Mayor Jones.
Yes.
you. Okay. Sayok?
Yes.
Sayok. I, Abakoga.
I
Abakoga. I, Klein.
Aye.
Klein. I, Constantine.
Aye.
Constantine. I, Flagger. Flagger.
Did we lose her?
Is she still in Idaho?
I think we might have lost her. I think she might have dropped off. I know she, her Wi-Fi, she's in a situation where her Wi-Fi is not stable.
Okay. I can mark her absent for this vote.
Okay.
And Jones.
Aye.
Jones. Okay. And with 5 ayes, the motion carries.
Okay. Thank you. Well, Andy, let's just make sure we put this back in next month's agenda, and then we'll revisit and see what updates there are. Okay, so now we move to item number 3, which is, if I could just go back to my. And welcome back, Mayor Flagger. Just so you know, just to update you, we did go ahead and take your vote and just marked you absent.
No problem. Thanks, Rico.
And you're now the chair.
Okay, we are now at item 3, which is consideration of items regarding the Santa Cruz, Santa Clara Roundtable and Cities Association. And in our packet we've provided several items for you for your information. I just want to give a preview of why this is on the agenda before we get into the details. Basically, as your president, my job is to execute our priorities based on the budget we have. So two things. One, I'm very, very concerned about our budget. And I don't know how else to stress it. I think we've tried to write that staff report as direct and as clearly as we can. I'm very concerned that we will run out of money at the current burn rate that is occurring. And so because of that, I've been very clear with Gary that he will not be spending, he is not to work on anything that is not roundtable related until we can make some decisions. And we've tried to outline what are some of the decisions that need to be made, what are some options, and always left it as an other if there are other ways that we can address some of the problems that have been identified. So with that, I did want to open the floor to both Andy and Nisa. Nisa is our treasurer. Again, the financials are included in your packet, and so wanted to see if there were any questions. Well, actually, before questions, I wanted to give the floor to both Andy and Nisa.
Nisa, do you go first?
Thanks, President Sack. I'll turn it over to Andy, who we know
Okay.
prepares these documents.
Okay, so the most important thing for everyone to know that at the current rate, also, I guess primarily you need to know that the end of the year financials cannot be completed yet because we have not received all of our legal bills. I think that there are a few outstanding through June because we need all of our June bills in. There are a few more still to come, but I know that a few weeks ago I gave you some financials and then I was able to update it because I received more bills. The most important thing to know that at our current rate that we are spending, and because of the unknown nature of some of the legal bills anticipated, we will fall next year to less than 1 month's reserve. Our bylaws say that we should have 6 to 9 months, and we will be less than 1 month. And so we would not be able to pay all of our bills that month. I do have prepared for you various financials, and so I can put them up as Mariko and Nisa, as you would like me to. I think that what it might be helpful for you is looking at the round table at where their status is, and then also looking at the profit and loss statement to show you the cities association, then the round table, and then the planning collaborative. And I just want to be, I tried to present it in such a way so that you could see that we have the cities association general fund, then we have the round table, and then we have the planning collaborative. And the planning collaborative is really cut and dry. The money just goes to the consultant. So would you like me to put any of those documents up for you right now to share, or Mariko, how would you like me to go through the staff report?
Well, we have, let's start with the document and the budget. Everyone has been provided that. And so first, are there any questions that Mayor Fliger or Andy can answer with all the various documents that have been provided?
And while we're waiting for questions, I will just add that I went through the documents that Andy created. And what I attempted to do was to look to see if there are any line items where maybe we could move some money or there was wiggle room, and there really isn't. And so, you know, part of this for me, President Sayok, is really, you know, being creative or thinking what are the options, as you said. But that was the lens I looked through when I was looking at the budget to see is there somewhere where we could move money, and everything is basically accounted for.
Exactly.
Our budget is pretty bare bones. You know, we pay for office items and we pay for Auden and I and for legal, and then just besides what Auden and I are paid for, you pay taxes. There's no benefits or anything there either. So yeah, it has always been a very bare bones budget. Would you like me to screen share anything?
I think President Sayak said, let's see if there are
Oh,
any
yeah, okay.
questions. And if no questions, then let's go through and have people look at the spreadsheet to see, maybe they'll see something that we haven't seen.
Okay, hold on.
I'm so sorry. I think I'm back. Sorry. And I'm sorry, what did I miss?
Doesn't
Nothing.
look like we have any questions, President.
Okay. So would, if there are no questions, are there any questions on the staff report and the options itself before we move into public comment?
Actually, going back to the forecast for the line item for legal services for $50,000.
Mhm.
Can we just refresh my memory? So the bulk of that is for the form of JPA. Was that the biggest driver for that expense?
So for the 50,000, you wanted, it was last year we had budgeted 23,000. And Kat recommended moving that to 30,000. And because it was unknown and because of what has been spent, we upped it to 50. Based on the latest bills that we've had.
And if I could just add that includes the various legal groups that we've had to hire.
Okay. That was it. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions?
Chair,
Yes.
I just want to confirm that we are still on 3A, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct. Okay. And actually, Gary, is it possible, even though we listed it 3A, 3B, 3C, to talk about it collectively, or do we have to go individually?
We can certainly talk about it collectively if you wish.
Okay. And so, again, I don't want to limit anyone's questions to what's just on the budget. If you have any questions on what's in 3B and 3C, that's in the staff report. Okay, seeing no questions, I am going to open public testimony and see if there was anything in if there's anyone who would like to speak on items 3. Okay. I just want to confirm, Mary Lynn, I thought I saw your hand raised. And I don't see it raised now. So maybe that was a mistake. Okay, so if we can have Mary Lynn.
Hi, Mary Lynn is unmuted and you have 3 minutes to speak.
I think I need to ask a question about the process since it's now open through 3A, 3B, 3C. There will be, I hope there will be opportunities for me to speak to items specifically. But I guess I need to make a statement now having to do with all of the above and 3.
And actually, Mary Lynn, I don't mean to interrupt, but I want to give you ample time. So let's start with 3A. So let's make sure we cover everything that you need to speak about.
So you are going to be breaking it down to 3A, 3B, 3C.
Well, how about this? I'm not going to limit you to 3 minutes. So why don't you share with us some of your comments?
Thanks, Mariko. So for 3A, I haven't heard anything that specifically has me wanting to make a comment on 3A. I only came in right now because I need to understand the process. If I can come in later on 3B or 3C, I would like to be able to do that.
Okay.
So
And
I'll throw it back to you for your guidance, please.
Okay, so I'm looking at the board and no one had any questions. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that before we actually begin any discussion on this, Mary Lynn, I'd love to give you some opportunity to talk about any of the items that have been presented to us. Again, I'm particularly looking at it from a very tight financial lens. And so anything that you can provide that would be helpful in our discussion would be great.
Good. Do you want me to speak now or wait for 3B and 3C?
No, I'd love to have you speak now. Thanks.
Okay, good. Thank you. First of all, I want to thank Chappie and Larry and Rania and my two other ad hoc members, Glenn Hendricks and Kathy Watanabe. I believe the ad hoc has been working in good faith to move forward to create an MOU so that the roundtable is clearly paying for all their contracted commitments. We have included in our discussions in Cassie as a fiscal agent and reimbursing those amounts. I believe that will come up later on if you get to see our proposed draft, which I thank Rania and Chappie for working with me last night and my own city's financial director. So we have always attempted and meant to pay our own expenses where we had a contract. We have included in the MOU not only Cities Association as a fiscal agent, because the ad hoc was formed to discuss that. We have included legal, which is a substantial amount of our budget going forward, and setting up a program coordinator. So we want to be paying our way as we go. What would be helpful for us in moving forward is a rate sheet, which we had hoped to get through discussions with the MOU. The items that we are being billed for, the legal fees, are exorbitant, as you have seen too. You're experiencing them also. We, at this point, had never been given any consideration for our contract or understanding of why we would be responsible. So whenever it is possible to find out exactly what we are being billed for, beyond just time talking, that'll be beneficial. There's also some concern on my part that until this investigation, which seems to be going on forever, is concluded, that it's not fair to try and make up what Cassie is finding in legal bills by putting them into the roundtable's budget. But that said, I have been heartened by the discussions that the ad hoc has had. And I think we are at the point that the attorney that we hired, that I recommended that Cassie hire, in other words, Kirsten Powell, is ready to discuss with Gary Baum, this Cassie attorney, how we can move forward in the most equitable way, having to do with setting up an MOU. And then, of course, there would be changes most likely in bylaws. I don't like to end any conversation on a bad note, but I do have to say that I have major concerns about some concerns regarding the contents, specifically in the history section of the Cities Association regarding the FCSC roundtable. And I don't know that there has ever been any way outside of, with the investigation, that I could address those. So I'm trying to recognize the closed sessions part of this and be respectful of it all. But I'm hoping in the long run that we can continue the conversation. I do believe we are a strong, as Larry said, feather in Cities Association cap, and more than ever now with the FAA's 2 briefings a couple of weeks ago, we have come to recognize that the roundtable is essential to our regional area. And it would be a shame for our area to have the roundtable go away. And so I hope that that is something that's in consideration in further discussions with you. Thank you for giving me this time.
Thank you. And so, colleagues, any questions of Councilmember Bernald? Yes, Mayor Constantine.
Thank you, Chair, actually, this is a question for a representative from the ad hoc committee. I'm wondering where the conversations have gone as far as what the association feel is owed versus what I'm hearing that the roundtable is saying that they don't owe. So I was wondering, how did those conversations go with the roundtable when it came to the bill that the city association thinks that is owed them? Or owed?
Yeah, so
And thank you. Real quick, Vice Mayor and Mayor, if I could, I want to make sure, we definitely will ask that question, but I want to see if there were any questions of Councilmember Bernald, because I want to see if there's any others that want to speak as well before we limit it to just our conversation.
Well, Chair, if I might, this may not be limited just to
I see.
our conversation, because this includes the roundtable and she's representing the roundtable. So I will probably ask her as well what her thoughts are once we hear from what the ad hoc committee met with.
Got it. Okay.
It's up to you.
No. Thank you for that clarification.
So to tell you where we are, so we've had a couple of discussions about the outstanding invoices, and they were very, very productive. And it really boiled down to one invoice from March that included Andy's time as well as Kat's time. And Mary Lynn has accepted Andy's time. So it really came down to specific line items on the legal charges that the roundtable had issues with, or concerns or questions. So the agreement and direction was for Mary Lynn to come back to me in the ad hoc committee, specifically identifying the line items that she has issues or questions about, except the ones that she agrees with. And we will work through the ones that are there where there are questions or she doesn't accept, have her go ahead and approve the ones that she does, and then try to resolve the outstanding issues. So we're waiting for her to get back to us with those line item breakdowns.
And there was no set time when that would be turned in then?
Like
a teacher, turn in your assignment.
No, you're absolutely, we should have had a deadline. No, there was no set deadline except as soon as possible.
So Councilman, if I may, Chair, Councilmember, do you think, or do you have a time frame where you can actually fulfill what was agreed upon at the ad hoc committee?
Thank you for your question. I want to clarify that there were questions about some of the billings from Andy, and I have had trouble working with the program because it was not enabled. And so Rania and Chappie have been very good, well, Annalie, about getting me a format that I could respond to Andy's. We just don't understand from the roundtable's view, when we do not have a contract and never had a contract for any legal fees with Cities Association regarding the investigation, where you can be asking us to pay for $10,000. It's more like 12 or more now with the latest invoice, and that's why I asked it to be pulled from consent. It's the roundtable has to, as a body, approve those expenses. And that has not happened because we do not have a further report on that, and we do not have a contract. And the next thing is that the invoices from Cities Association have not gone out to the individual members of the boards of the roundtable, the cities and the county, so that at this point there are no funds to reimburse anything either. So we were in the last couple of days working rather frantically, Chappie and Rania and I, to get a proposed budget that actually does speak to what is contracted and what we can agree with, so that we can bring it to you all, hopefully today, for your approval as a draft, because nothing has been approved by our roundtable, because there's been no contract and no explanation of how this is serving a purpose for our roundtable. It's so we're in a circular conversation here, Rich.
So Marilyn, am I to understand then that there is, even on fees that are agreed upon, because there's no contract, even those fees could not be paid?
No, we're not agreed at this point. The ad hoc that is represented by the roundtable, Glenn, Kathy, and I, are looking at the items that Andy has billed and trying to come to some understanding as to why they're being billed to the roundtable. And that discussion needs to move forward because the entire ad hoc, meaning now we're including Chappie and Larry, don't quite understand why the city's association is billing the roundtable for some of Andy's services. We need clarification on that.
So Chair, rather than going back and forth, I will just leave it. I will just say, give you this comment. It seems like there's a huge disconnect between what the ad hoc thinks the roundtable's agreed to and what the roundtable has agreed to. And it doesn't sound like there is going to be any remedy that's going to be made or has been made yet. So it sounds like we're still at square one.
If I may, we're not at square one. We're moving forward. We're trying to understand on both ends how we can work to be mutually beneficial to everyone and act in good faith.
So Chair, so going back to my statement that there's money that we as association think we're owed, and the roundtable doesn't think that they owe us, or that they have to discuss it because we're not under contract. These are all new terms that I'm hearing for the first time, and it's troubling because it doesn't seem as if, and as Marilyn herself said, it's a circular conversation, and that's troubling, and especially hearing the financial situation that we are in, and I think we're kind of relying on our reimbursement. This conversation is very troubling. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, and can I respond, Richard? Yeah, I definitely see, where you can come to that conclusion. I don't think there's a real disconnect between the roundtable and the ad hoc committee. I think it's just a question of just trying to work with them to have a basic understanding of what the issues are. And so the way I've approached this is working with Mary Lynn and trying to identify the areas that we agree on. And we've had invoices that she's approved and we've got those resolved. And then identifying areas of concern that she has. She has brought up some points, and I thought that she had valid points in terms of we're really going through a process which I'm breaking out in two parts. One is pre-MOU, post-MOU. There's a lot of issues that we're trying to work through that, once we get a new MOU in place, would address that and we wouldn't have that problem moving forward. But we're trying to do some cleanup on the back end. So I'll just give you one specific example or analogy, and that is that I might feel that there's a need for me to talk to Gary about a roundtable issue. So I'll go to Gary, get his guidance and advice about that issue. And it might take Gary, 3 hours or 4 hours to get that resolved. Then we go to the roundtable and say, hey, here's a bill for Gary's time for the questions and work that I had Gary perform. The roundtable would not have had an opportunity to even be notified that request or work is taking place. They wouldn't have an opportunity to have input on that request. All they would have is, a request for them to pay the bill. So those are some concerns that were raised and concerns that we're trying to work through. So it's not a disconnect. It's just a question of, what process are we going to go through to resolve these issues?
And through the chair, if I just may ask a clarifying question.
Sure.
Excuse me. So first I want to say I probably used the wrong word, disconnect, But if you could just clarify something for a minute. So
Sure.
there are charges that the roundtable has agreed to that they owe.
Yes,
Is that correct?
that's correct.
So, and through, again, through the chair, so Mary Lynn, are there charges that the roundtable is willing to reimburse the city association for now?
There are some charges, yes.
Do you have an idea of what those may be?
No, and this request had not been made of us prior to the roundtable meeting that we had on July 27th or 8th. So that was not part of a discussion where we could get approval from the roundtable. I, as the chair, do not have the authority to say, okay, sure, roundtable, I'm spending your money on what this or that.
And I
unless
can
have full
completely get
roundtable
that.
approval.
I completely understand that. So I'm assuming then that your next meeting, that will be discussed?
It appears that it will. The next meeting, because we are on a limited budget, is not until October. So it appears that we would have to hold a special meeting to discuss this. I talked to ESA, our consultant, today about that. In doing that, we will have to remove the potential of having a subcommittee meeting on technical working group, which has to do now with what the FAA is putting back on us to discuss. So yes, we have had consideration. We have had discussions about convening a special meeting and making sure with our attorney, because throughout all this, we are now expending money with our representative, our legal counsel, Kirsten Powell, and making sure that under a special meeting situation, we can approve budgetary items. So yes, the conversations are active. We are trying to move forward. We are trying to address this, but even Kirsten Powell has said that she would like to speak to Gary Baum so we could get some clarification on whether without a contract, not whether, how without a contract for these kinds of items, we can even as a roundtable approve the expenditure of funds when there was no contract. We have to get approval from the roundtable as a whole. And we have no income this year because Cities Association has not sent out the invoices for the dues for the roundtable.
Thank you very much. And
Hold
Jackie,
on.
again, I apologize for using that word, but you explained it quite well. How I almost said disconnect again, but how the misunderstanding can be about how the bill is owed. So thank you very much for that clarification. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
And just for the record, no offense taken, Rich, you've been a lot harder on me on other occasions. So.
And so I want to make a couple of clarifications. And then I saw Andy raise her hand and Mayor Fleiger. And this is where this circular motion again, where because we are on such limited funds and I'm monitoring every amount that could be billed, I have believed that we should direct Gary before he works on anything related to roundtable, because we are on limited budget. And the more he spends on this, answering questions on roundtable, the less money we have on things like the JPA that we've all said we wanted to do this year. So that's, again, another reason why I'm bringing this to all of you and bringing this to the full board, because at the end of the day, bills have to be paid, and we need to identify how those bills will be paid. And ultimately, they're all coming from all of our city's budgets. So again, I want that to be on the back of your mind as we try and solve the problems today. So Andy, I know you raised your hand. Did you want to provide some information? And then I'm going to
Yes,
go.
I just want everyone to be clear that the Cities Association cannot invoice any of the jurisdictions for the roundtable for their dues because they have not passed a budget and they have not sent a request for us to invoice. I wouldn't know what I would be invoicing, so I wanted to make sure that was clear.
And so Mayor Fleiger and then Councilmember Abikoga.
Thank you. I have several points that I'll try to make quickly, and I'll start off with what you said, Mayor Sayoc, which I agree with 100%, that we need to make sure we have a clear process giving direction to Gary so that we can somewhat control the costs. That's definitely a good suggestion moving forward. The second point, and thank you so much, Councilmember Bernald, it's good to hear that your ad hoc, the roundtable ad hoc, has been working well with our Citizens Association ad hoc group, because it's so important for this to really move forward. Just a couple points. One, I want to echo what Mayor Constantine said about timing. You know, I'm going to wear my treasurer's hat because it's so important to hear back from the roundtable on which costs they're going to reimburse the Citizens Association for and which ones they're going to contest for whatever reason. Because when we're looking at our budget, we also need to figure out what we're going to get reimbursed for to better understand what the delta looks like, and to identify what solution as a Citizens Association we want to pursue to make up that delta, but also ensure that we have budget for next year. And so, Councilmember Bernald, I heard there may be a special meeting call, but I do want to emphasize what Mayor Constantine said. If possible, I think it would be beneficial to the roundtable and the Citizens Association if we could get that done as soon as possible so that we can also look at the Citizens Association budget and figure out solutions. I also understand that we may not have a contract in place that required the roundtable to reimburse us for these funds. You know, I have 2 points there. I defer to the attorneys to figure out if there's another way to do it short of doing some retroactive contract. But as a roundtable board, I imagine that, you know, the investigation does involve the roundtable. And so even without a contract where the roundtable agreed to pay these funds, I would hope that members of the roundtable board would still want to contribute and be partners with us in this investigation. We're all the same cities, as Mayor Sayoc just said. And so if it means coming to your special meeting at the roundtable and making this plea, I really think it's very important for the roundtable members to understand, even without a MOU, even without a contract, even without anything requiring the roundtable, I do think the case has been made why the roundtable should pay these funds towards the investigation. And then the last thing, and I think, you know, we can't really answer that question today, but it's, you know, once we understand, and Gary, you know, this may be a closed session discussion, but I do want to better understand as well what our options are. If, you know, the roundtable, for example, and I liked Chappie's example where it is ambiguous. And so for those, I can see as a board, we may decide, you know, it's not worth pursuing because it's not clear who really owns that legal cost. But if it's clear that it should be the roundtable's expense and they should cover it, again, we're all the same cities, but because Andy and I are looking at the budget and the President Sayoc, and we understand our shortfall, especially going into next year, I do think it's important for us to figure out what our options are in ensuring that we get the full reimbursement we can and are entitled to before we look at other options of going back to our cities or going back to the roundtable cities or whatever other options are on the table. Thank you.
And Councilmember Abikoga?
Thank you. So Lisa mentioned it, but as a city that is both member of the roundtable and the city association, you know, for us, it honestly doesn't really matter. The money's still coming out of the same city budget. So, you know, I guess I'm not as concerned. You know, bottom line, I think we're going to have to raise dues for the city association. Possibly the roundtable will have to raise dues. Sounds like we have to figure this out in order to be able to invoice the cities for those dues for either or both entities. Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge is going to be more with the cities that are not in the roundtable and how they're going to respond to this. So I guess my thought was, or question was, how much of this should we be thinking about bringing back to our city councils? Because ultimately, if it has to do with city budgets, my assumption is that we should be conferring with our councils on that kind of determination or decision. I would also just wanted to know, like approximately how much are we talking about that's in dispute? Because if it sounds like there might be some conference on bills that the roundtable has agreed to pay. So yeah, what is that amount that we're looking at that's in dispute? So yeah, those are my thoughts. But I do think that if we're talking about, it's going to go back to the cities regardless, right? So at what point do we need to get the cities involved? And that maybe that's a Gary question.
Okay. Yes, Mary Lynn?
Thank you. Margaret, you nailed it. Whatever happens is going to have to go back to the cities on one level or another. The member cities of the roundtable have been paying their own to this point, to paying their own way as what was agreed to. And again, unfortunately, I have to stress that Cities Association never proposed a contract for reimbursement from the roundtable for the costs of being a fiscal agent. And so now we get back into the circular conversation of, we have moved far enough with the MOU to say, yes, this should be recognized from this point forward. And we will do some consideration from January on. But we definitely need the defining factors. We need to have a sheet that actually calls out what is acceptable to both bodies. And until we can have that kind of a conversation, it does become problematic. Nisa, I really did appreciate what you had to say also. Unfortunately, so far, nothing has been presented to us that gives us a rationale. Wasn't the word you used, but that's what's coming to my mind for why we do have to pay for Cat Wellman's invoices, which are about $10,000. They're a little bit under $10,000. So that's not something that the ad hoc, all five of us have discussed, because we don't quite understand how that's all happened. And there was, as Chappie so well explained, a situation where there were expenditures made, questions for Cat Wellman, let's say, in the past, and yet we didn't know those questions were going to be asked. We didn't benefit from any answers. We didn't know the billing was going to be ours. And now we are expected to pay it. So at this point, I have been very straightforward with Chappie, and he has accepted it and said, without that rationale, without that understanding, at this point, the Cat Wellman invoices, which are a little under 10,000, so you know a number, are in dispute because we don't have a rationale. We don't have an understanding as to how this came about, that the roundtable had contracted for this, had benefited from it, or will benefit from it in the future, or that even those discussions had occurred. So I wish I had a better answer for you, but I'm hoping I got to both of the items that you brought up. And Mac, you definitely are right on. This is going to come out of our city's budgets no matter what. And it is not something that the 7 cities, so not a majority of the cities, have not been, have had to pay for the roundtable. And just as a whoop whoop for the roundtable, there are cities that haven't joined roundtable who are benefiting from our existence.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much, Councilman. Oh, yes, Mayor Klein.
This is a question to, I guess, Andy, as far as first billing our cities. So we've billed all of our cities and have the 15 cities and have received money for that. Is that correct?
For the Cities Association dues?
Yes.
Yes, they were billed because we followed our bylaw process and we noticed, and we I gave first notice when we first presented the budget to the city managers, as we called out, and said therefore we were able to bill our cities on July 1st.
Got it.
And yes, we are receiving funds.
And so we've received all those funds, or just?
No, not all of them yet.
Just wondering.
Yeah.
And then as far as the other billing, and is this due to the way the bylaws are written for the cities, for the roundtable, that until the budget is finalized, then the billing process goes out? I can't remember the
Well,
budget.
it
I
would be
can't remember.
it would be premature to invoice anyone if you don't have if you don't have any bylaws approved. There's nothing I'm sorry, until the budget is approved, there is no direction to invoice anyone. I mean, the budget approval is what creates your invoice.
So if the roundtable actually put in, some estimated cost for, and we'll kind of look forward from a crystal ball standpoint for covering the cities association costs on top of their own costs, and the cities association costs being, legal, auditing, whatever portion of your time is there, then getting that budget approved, then they could then conceivably a billing could go out to the cities that are part of the roundtable.
Yeah, once they create a budget, and just so you know, while I'm not supposed to be working on the roundtable, I did contact Evan. I did contact Kirsten and let them know that they needed to get the budget on their agenda so that they could pass one. They did not put an agenda; they just did a financial update on their agenda instead of a budget.
Okay, thank you.
If I may speak to that, please.
Sure.
Thank you. However, Andy communicated with Kirsten and with Evan, I proceeded with their information to do an update on where we stood. There's always been the understanding that until the MOU got somewhere along in the process with the ad hoc, that it would be difficult to put in hard numbers in the budget. I conferred with several cities, I conferred with other people, and I did a presentation based on where we were and what the costs would be. At the time of our meeting, it was not clear that the Cities Association had not gone ahead as they had in June of last year and sent out the invoices. It had been my understanding, I don't know where I got the information, I wouldn't name anybody now if I did, that process had occurred. I had been told I held it in good confidence that I was being told properly, that the budget for the roundtable would be the same, the dues would be the same amount, and that the contract with ESA had been extended through December. So I had a ballpark idea of where things would land and where we could go forward. It was never told to me directly that I had to have a budget in place so that the invoices could go out. I actually had to contact a couple of city managers and find out if they had received the invoices. And then I found out after asking Chappie that, oh no, you had to have a budget in place. In January, when the dues notices should have gone out, we didn't have any place where we could have landed on a budget because we weren't far enough in an ad hoc. So what's the Paul Newman movie? Lack of communication here. And it was through no failing of the roundtables that they didn't get to vote on a budget. We just weren't there at that point. As of last night or the night before, there should be a budget. Chappie, I'm hoping that you can provide that does explain where the line items are, that it is a draft budget. It's done with the best intents to include everything. I believe there was input that somehow came from Cities Association because there were items that changed where I had holes and questions because I needed that information from Cities Association. I didn't have approval with an MOU to go ahead and slate it in as a solid number, but it is here. It is available now. I'm hoping Chappie or Rania can provide it, and that with the agreement today, I'm hoping from Cities Association, we can then go ahead with sending that out to the cities, individual cities and the county, so that the process can move forward.
And any further questions? And Mary Lynn, you had a question?
No, I haven't figured out raise hand, lower hand. Is it up
Okay.
now?
No, it's down now.
Good, I'll leave it alone then. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so no questions. Would anyone else like to speak? Okay, seeing no hands raised, I am going to close public testimony now. And we'll bring back this conversation. And I do want to just acknowledge real quick, I believe Rania has been doing a lot of the staff work on behalf of Vice Mayor Jones. So do you have anything you'd like to show us? There's reference to a draft budget. And so
Yes, there is a draft budget. I don't have it at my fingertips.
and while you look for that, I'm going to go to Mayor Constantine.
Thank you. Before you close out the public comment, I just wanted to clarify where we have left this. What is expected? What are the steps that we're going to be taking moving forward?
Yes, okay, so I'm going to ask Vice Mayor Jones or Mayor Klein to respond, and then before we close it, Councilmember Bernald as well. So your understanding of where are we and how, go ahead, Vice Mayor?
Right, so my understanding where we are is that an MOU is being prepared that when it's finalized, will address all of these questions, issues, concerns that are coming up, that we have a draft budget that I can provide to the executive board. And based on the feedback and input that I get from Andy and the board, we can use that as a baseline budget to get a bill out to the member cities, at least so we can invoice them and we can get that, get their payments in. And then continue to work through the process of resolving the outstanding invoice where there's questions. So those are the three areas I see that we need to work through.
Mayor Constantine, does that answer your question?
It does, Chair, but the other question is then, as far as the MOU is concerned, what is our, I guess, part in that, and what steps do we have to take in the MOU?
Well,
if any?
And if I could answer that, Vice Mayor Jones, that is a legal cost on Gary's part that I need I want clear guidance from the board that this is where we want to spend our remaining dollars. Again, we don't have that much dollars left. So I don't want to speak for Gary. He wants to but I'm pretty darn sure he wants to make sure he's going to get paid for every hour he puts in this.
I'm sure.
And he's nodding no, which is really amazing.
Pro bono.
Not every hour, every 6 minutes.
Every 6 minutes. So that's where we're at, because again, I want to make sure the board of directors understands so that there's no question later, why isn't the JPA done? I'm bringing this back to all of you so that you can then tell Gary and I how you want your remaining dollars to be spent. So that's why we're bringing this back to you. Any other questions? Yes, Mayor Klein?
And this is just a general question. So I haven't seen the preliminary budget that Chappie and Mary Lynn worked with. So from a billing standpoint, so assuming that this is the preliminary budget for the roundtable, does that have to be approved prior to the time billing goes out to? And this is probably a question to Gary or Andy or Mary Lynn, I'm not really sure. Does it have to be approved by the roundtable prior to the point of billing the cities that are part of the roundtable?
And so who can answer that question? Who's best able to answer that question? I don't know. Mary Lynn?
Larry, can you state the question one more time?
Sure. So there's a preliminary budget that Andy and Mary Lynn, or that Chappie and Mary Lynn have been working on. Is it conceivable to actually bill the roundtable cities prior to the roundtable basically approving that with their sitting members? That's the question.
I don't think it's appropriate because you have bylaws and you'd be violating your bylaws. And as their fiduciary agent, I don't think that it would be okay for us if their board members need to vote on it. I just don't think it's appropriate.
And then, so real quick, I see lots of hands, so let's make sure we do this orderly. Go ahead, Councilmember Bernald.
Andy is correct. We could not approve the agenda, the account without the roundtable's approval. But there's we should be able to pull together a roundtable special meeting quickly if that's what it takes. The budget does include, as I mentioned, accounting for the expense that's left that we have to account for through the fiscal year with our ESA or renegotiating with them. The amount that is in the budget that we plugged in is okay with ESA at this point, if that's how we proceed. There also is a line item for legal at $25,000, which is a rounded ballpark figure that may or may not have included the MOU in it. There also is a line item for the fiscal agent based on costs overall. I don't have it right at my hand either, but I think it's about $5,300. And then there, although don't quote me on that. And there also then is a line item for hiring a program coordinator. Then other expenses and perhaps office fees. So we tried to cover everything that we could anticipate would be realistic in our budget. And it just happens at this point to add up to even the 73 cents that we're getting in revenue. The 187,000 some odd cents. So I'm hoping that we've covered all our bases and that once presented to the roundtable, they would give approval because they are anxious to move forward with the job that they're tasked to do.
Okay, and so I'm going to start with Andy and then Councilmember Abikoga and then Mayor Fliger. So Andy? You're on mute still.
I'm going to pass for right now. Thanks.
Okay, and then Councilmember Abikoga?
So I guess I'm a little unclear with the MOU. Is this an MOU for retroactive, or are we talking about moving forward? Because if we're talking about moving forward, I think that conversation needs to tie into the next item on our agenda. I'm not ready to approve any kind of MOU at this point right now.
Right, and absolutely, I'm sorry, Councilmember Abikoga, that's not on the agenda. We don't even, no one has looked at it on our part yet. So I think it's a concept that the ad hoc committee has been working on.
Okay, and then in terms of a budget, as I was listening, it sounds like unless we've already decided this, and sorry, my memory's not that great these days, but as a fiscal agent, have we decided on what we're going to charge? And I think it's mainly that cost that we should be discussing if we haven't yet.
No, that we have not discussed that yet either. And so that's a conversation that the ad hoc committee has been having.
So I think we need to figure out, one, if we want to continue this relationship, if so, two, an MOU, then three, what's in that MOU. And I would definitely include, there's a lot of things, but as a fiscal agent, I know, other nonprofits that are fiscal agents for other organizations do charge like a 15% or some kind of fee. And I guess that was never built in. I wasn't around when the original agreement was created. But I think all of that would need to be laid out. But before we get there, I actually think we need to have the next discussion.
Yes, and to address that question, I have the draft budget And that was one of the questions or issues that came up, was the fiscal agent fee and what that fee should be, whether it's, 5%, 10%, 15%. And there's if you look at what other agencies and nonprofits are charging, it's all over the map in terms of, what a proper fee is. But we were looking at somewhere in the 5% range. But, again, that's open for discussion and we can work that out.
I think we need to have that discussion. And then the other, let's see. Oh, the other question I had was, as a cities association, are we able to augment our budget? So, for cities, we do a mid-year budget adjustment. Can we do something like that if we need to basically adjust the budget?
And that's a good question. And I know that's one of the items under consideration in the staff, the options of basically in front of us that we'll get back to. Mayor Fliger?
Thank you. Just three quick things. One, I do want to touch on the retroactive because I do think it's relevant to the reimbursement item that we are discussing. And so if this MOU would cover those costs moving forward, I do strongly support also having it going retroactive so that it would cover similar costs that we've incurred to date. The second question I have, I'm just going to pick up on something that Mayor Klein said that I thought was brilliant, which was the idea that the budget hasn't been approved. And I understand the process that it has to go to the roundtable board first. This may have to go back out to Councilmember Bernald, but I'm wondering if we include in this proposed budget the dollar amount we currently have the roundtable owing the Cities Association, because the roundtable board is the board that approves it for it to go back to the 7 roundtable member cities, correct? And so if we were to, and if I'm saying something that's not correct, let me know. But the idea is, because the budget hasn't been approved yet, could we include the line item for these legal costs? Again, we're one of the same, so that when the budget gets approved at the roundtable, then we can issue the invoices to the individual cities that would have that amount already accounted for. And the third point is the timing again. And I really want to emphasize the timing, because as the treasurer for the Cities Association, we really need to figure out our budget. And I know there's special meetings and there's things that we still need to figure out, but we really need to figure this out as soon as possible. And I know I said it before, but I do want to emphasize that, because we need to really understand where the shortfall is, because separate from the roundtable going to the cities and invoicing them, the Cities Association, once we have been able to calculate what our shortfall is in order to perform the services that we've been doing, we're also going to need to make a mid-year adjustment and invoice the cities for the difference to make up that shortfall. So please, Chappie, Larry, and titles, if we could really work with Marilyn and the rest of the roundtable ad hoc group to get that information and get it finalized, I think it would be a win-win for everybody and benefit everybody involved.
Okay, so any other questions?
My hand raised?
No, but go ahead, council member.
Thank you. Just for the record, it's 8 cities and the county, so there's 9 entities. And we really do, as a roundtable, need the rationalization of the explanation of why we are being billed for Cat Wellman, and why we are in this current agenda, why we are being billed for Gary Baum's services. Maybe Chappie shed some light on that with his statement when he was giving you an example today. It's something that I have to sell to the roundtable members. I think we all can understand that. I have to have a staff report. I have to have an explanation of what the scope of services were and how the Cities Association believes that the roundtable is responsible for that money. And this is also going to raise questions because the invoices from Cat Wellman speak specifically to the investigation, and we don't have any results from there. We don't have any conclusion. There still is concern at the roundtable members as a whole body as to how long this investigation is going, because it's hanging over our ability to perform the work that we need to be doing. So if I can get some rationale for why Cities Association, beyond the fact that you're low on money, are saying that we need to be paying you, is helpful. I'm not going to say anything more about the investigation. There's questions that I have, but I have to honor the closed session nature of this also.
Thank you, council member. And council member Abikoga.
So to respond, in my mind, I think it's very clear that anything related to the investigation that was triggered by the roundtable is a cost of the roundtable. So that's why that's how I.
But we didn't trigger the investigation. And that's where I'm trying to honor the closed session nature of this. I don't think we can discuss it.
The complaint.
Gary, do you want to weigh in on what we can and can't discuss? Just so we're cautious. And you're on mute now, Gary.
We're at the precipice, but we haven't quite crossed it. I think I seriously don't want to get in the middle of all this and don't want to be revealing anything, but the investigation occurred because of actions involving allegations against the roundtable. So it would not have occurred if it were not for the roundtable. But it's a decision of this board to determine and the ad hoc committee how that's ultimately allocated.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate everyone. We do have to stay within the precipice. So let's, if it's okay with you, council member, Abikoga, you've shared your opinion. Council member Bernal, you've shared yours. I think ultimately we need to make some decisions on how to proceed. And before we get to that, I do want to make sure that any other questions are asked before we actually begin some discussion and decision making. Okay, I see no other hands raised. And thank you very much, Councilmember Bernal. Your answers, your help was illuminating today. And hopefully all our questions are answered and we can begin a conversation now. Okay, so I'm closing public comment. No hands were raised. And so I go back to our board for discussion. And again, I think there are several items. Actually, it may, if you could look at your staff report, we've tried to identify options, but again, ultimately we're problem solving today. You can't squeeze any more money out of our budget. And so we need to figure out what to do, how to do it, and who to ask. And again, I've made it clear to Gary that until these issues are resolved, not to spend any time on roundtable costs, because at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we have enough legal reserves to do the JPA, which is what you've authorized me to spend time on for Gary. Would anyone like to jump in on some of what has been presented in our staff report?
Well, I'll go ahead and just kick things off to kind of get people's juices flowing, I guess. My plan was just to continue the work of the ad hoc. I think Rich, is on point with, we need to have some firm deadlines because we need to have, draw a line in the sand in terms of getting this stuff resolved. I actually also like Nisa's recommendation in terms of incorporating the outstanding invoices in the budget to go to the roundtable for them to debate, discuss, and hopefully approve. And at the same time, we can, again, as the ad hoc, we can continue to work with the roundtable to resolve these issues, move the MOU forward. And also in parallel tracks, we can work through the invoices through the ad hoc process. That'd be great. Otherwise, it could go through the roundtable budget process. So that's kind of what I want to throw out in terms of what I envision as a path forward.
Okay. And
But you got to realize I'm in this infinite loop. So any input, advice, suggestions would be greatly appreciated.
Okay. And if I could just weigh in, and I don't want to take away Mayor Fliger's thunder, we need funds coming in ASAP. So anything we can do to speed that process up, I cannot emphasize enough. We need funds coming back in at our current burn rate. We will not have enough for me to hand things over to you, Chappie.
Yeah.
Okay, Councilmember
That would be good.
So I guess I'm a little unclear because I had thought that I think it was at our January meeting, we gave the ad hoc committee 3 months, I think it was, to come back to us with recommendations, including whether we could continue to be the fiscal agent or not based on the relationships. So I don't know where we are because this is August now. So if someone, I know the clock got stopped at some point, but where are we on that timeline? Because I'm actually, thinking we have to make that decision now or soon.
And you're absolutely correct, Margaret. We did have that 3-month timeline because of all the external issues that happened. We stopped the clock, and so we started back up again. And I'm not sure if we hit the 3-month timeline from when we started back up. I can look at my calendar and let you know, but we're pretty close to being in alignment with a 3-month timeline from when we started it back up.
So that's what I'm looking for is the ad hocs coming back to us. There's been things that I guess have occurred that I didn't expect to occur until it came back to us, including the roundtable actually resuming meetings. So I guess, I'm a little confused, but if we're hitting by 3 months, my expectation was that you would come back to us with the report out on this is what we worked out, or you came back and said we can't resolve these issues, which is what I'm starting to feel, frankly, if we can't even figure out or agree on finances and cost recovery. That's a question, a red flag for me, to be frank. And at that point, we would have to decide if we want to continue as a fiscal agent or not. So I guess I'm waiting for that report.
Duly noted. Thank you.
We can certainly agendize this. Part of our action today is to agendize what we want for the following meeting. So again, I want to make that that's something that we need to do. Mayor Constantine?
Thank you, Chair. Margaret, you brought up a very good point. I do remember sometime in the past where we had a vote that we were going to sever ties with the roundtable, and then somehow things got lost in the COVID fog. And even in today's discussions, there isn't any discussion on our separation. We're talking about MOUs, and the conversation didn't even talk about finding another fiscal agent. So I definitely think that that's something that we should agendize, because as far as I'm concerned, we are still on that path because that was the vote that we had taken. And until there's another vote that says that we are not going to be separating, I think that we should continue in that route. And correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the ad hoc committee was put together to kind of help the roundtable to find another fiscal agent and to separate. I didn't think it was to bring us closer together and to intertwine our relationship any further. Am I wrong in that assumption?
That wasn't the direction that I was working under. The direction I was working under is that if we can identify and resolve the outstanding issues and figure out a working model where we can continue to be the fiscal agent for the roundtable, or at the discretion of the executive board, the board, sever ties.
And I see Gary is getting very uncomfortable in his chair. So I'm going to stop talking about things that are not on today's agenda and ask that be agendized in a future agenda.
All right.
And just as a supplement to that, definitely that was a goal I think we talked about for our September meeting. I think we mentioned it. I can't remember now, but I think that was the goal for our September meeting, to basically bring that back and talk about the updates of everything that's been went through the discussions on that ad hoc committee.
Okay, and before I recognize Mayor Flagler and Councilmember Abikoga, it is my intent to bring the financial issue to the full board, because again, there is no September. I don't know how else to emphasize this to you guys. There is no September, October, November, December until we figure out our budgetary situation. So if it is the pleasure of this executive board, we can have that full, large conversation in August, if both Vice Mayor Jones and Mayor Klein feel that you're ready.
We'll be ready.
Okay, so then let's go ahead. That decision has been made. October, for our full board meeting in August 13 or 12, next Thursday, we will put this on the agenda. And so Mayor Flagler.
I just want to clarify, Mariko. So the question or the report back from the ad hoc on the relationship between the roundtable and Citizens Association, we're going to agendize that for the next board meeting in August. Is that what I heard?
Correct.
Oh, okay. So we won't have an executive meeting on that first. So I support agendizing it, whether it's at whatever the next meeting is appropriate. I support agendizing that topic as well.
Let me just point out something. Mayor Constantine, he's overreading my body language. I was just twitching in my seat. You have on your agenda right now the relationship, possible divestiture, possible continuing and changing. So you have a pretty wide range today, and I believe that sets you up for your board meeting. And I need to learn not to fidget, but it's probably not going to happen today.
Yes, and so Mayor Flagler, this is the executive board meeting where we're talking about next week's agenda. And so we will do that for Thursday.
Okay, so let me address the budget issue, which I think is the first question. And I support one, obviously having the roundtable reimburse the Citizens Association for the full amount we're asking for. I do want to underscore the fact that, thanks for the correction, Councilmember Bernald, you have 9 entities. And so if the roundtable hypothetically looks at this proposed amount and says, no, we'll only pay 50%, just a hypothetical. The other 50% will have to be paid by the Citizens Association, which consists of the same cities. I mean, one of the main concerns there is the cities that are not part of the roundtable may object to it because this cost, as Gary explained, directly relates to the roundtable. So I really think, and as the mayor of a city that's part of the roundtable, although we're also having the same budget issues like a lot of cities, it makes a lot of sense to me that the roundtable would cover this cost as opposed to sending it back to the Citizens Association. And the full body would have to figure out how we're going to pay that. So it's either it goes back to the roundtable cities or it goes back to all 15 cities. But someone will need to pay for this amount. So I strongly support our ad hoc, working with Marilyn and her ad hoc to make the case to the roundtable board why we should include the full amount in their budget and send the invoices to the roundtable cities. And I heard Councilmember Bernald ask for more information or justification for CAT's costs. Let's do that. As the ad hoc committee, work to figure out why it makes sense. And I think Gary gave us one argument, and it does. It really does make sense why we should have the roundtable cities cover that portion of the cost. So that's what I would support for the 3A, B, and C on our agenda this evening. And then the next step, President Sayoc, for me is once we understand or get confirmation that the roundtable cities will pay that amount, then unfortunately, I do think we're going to have to agendize for the full board to all our cities to say, we need X amount to survive. You're gonna have to go back to your cities to ask for this amount. But I do think those are looking at the options. It's a two-step process that I think will help us survive financially. And then on the third issue, since we are discussing it, on our future relationship with the roundtable, will the ad hoc give us a report then? Because I thought they were going to report, then we would discuss and give direction on what that relationship going forward should look like. So I'm not sure what discussion you want us to have on that third piece.
And that's a very good question. And so before I answer that, I'm going to ask Vice Mayor Jones and Mayor Klein. I mean, we've agendized this. This is the only thing that we've agendized to have this discussion. So are you prepared to share with us where we are and to answer the questions that have already been raised by other members of this executive board?
Are we prepared for the August the August board meeting?
No, I think
Or for the September board meeting.
no, for the August. It's now agendized for
Right.
August.
August 12th.
Right.
Correct.
So as Larry mentioned, we were going to have something formal to present we were planning on the September board meeting. But you made the request, and Larry and I are just gonna have to burn the midnight oil to get something ready to present for the August meetings. So it is what it is. We'll just make it happen.
Well, let me make sure, again, I want to make sure this is a democracy here. It's
Hey.
my request, but I think Councilmember Abikoga made a good point. I feel like we're parsing things out, and we need the big picture. Are we moving forward? Are we not, before we get into the little pictures of fiscal agent cost and MOUs? Because I think ultimately, again, I don't want Gary to work on an MOU if this group at the end decides we're not moving forward. Then we've just wasted money again. So
Right.
I'm trying to control costs.
No, I understand exactly what you're saying. So you're saying a go, no go decision. And all we can do is present to the board where we are, what we have, and where we are in the process. And the board can decide, hey, continue forward or, shut it down.
And so I'm looking at the others. Does it make sense to put this on August 13? I mean, you could just nod or shake if
So we could easily give an update at the August 12th meeting on, and this is the whole thing is, a summary of what the discussions have been up to this date, what the process from a roundtable effort of trying to find another fiscal agent, so we can go through all the steps over the last 8 months or 9 months that have happened, talking about the discussions that we have, as well as, ultimately what the resolution of kind of the answers to each of the questions. And this isn't, a new MOU is ready. And I think ultimately this would give conceivably the direction that some of the executive board is talking about here of, okay, these were the issues and these are the, let's say, the tentative agreements between the ad hoc members on what this organization might look like, what the relationship between the two organizations might be. That being said, at that point, if there is, let's say, great issue with certain of those items, that would help kind of deal with some of the items or some of the itemized questions that we undertook when we started this discussion.
Okay, thank you. And Councilmember Abikoga.
So I support getting this on a board meeting agenda soon. I guess my expectation was that the ad hoc would report out to our e-board first, because frankly, I would like to know, like I've had some, admittedly, like, people have talked about this, frankly, in terms of like, what are the alternatives, if not the city association? It sounds like there's a couple of potentially good options. And so I would like to, bring that up. I mean, they may have been explored and they were turned down. I'd like to know why, because I think some of them are actually really good options. So I would like to have that conversation, but in light of our financial situation, do we have that time is the question. So do we need to put this
And let me propose two things. And again, this is a possible proposal to see if we can make some decisions. I think first and foremost, Nisa brought a strong recommendation, and I'd like to make that into a motion. We need to recommend to the full board what to do with our legal bills. And Nisa made a strong recommendation, and I'd like to formalize that. So Mayor Fliger, can you make that into a motion?
Oh, President, so I move that we recommend to the full board to have the round table reimburse the Citizens Association for the full amount that the ad hoc has presented to the round table. So that's the first recommendation. And then the second, and Andy, if I need to amend it, let me know. And then the second part of the motion that I'd recommend to the board is that we go back to the individual cities that make up the Citizens Association to make up the difference between what the roundtable is able to cover and where the Citizens Association budget shortfall is. So it's a two-step process for the roundtable, but also for the full board.
Okay. And so Andy, do you need to make any modifications to that or questions?
Yeah, can you just, I would just like to put together a new packet because we have not billed them since we have not heard from them. We knew that the roundtable was objecting to the bills. I have more legal bills. I think that we should just put everything into one packet, and I would work with Nisa and also so that Chappie and Larry could look at those as well, and then we would send them over as one packet. And of course, Gary. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. And do I have a second to this?
Second.
Okay. And then Councilmember Abikoga, comments?
Just a question. How does this relate to the vote we took on Monday?
Oh, Mondays. Gary, would you like to answer that for me, please?
Well, that would be additional legal bills related to the investigation.
It was just the additional.
I don't really follow the motion, and I think it might need some clarification. So maybe when you're done, you might want to restate it, and then I would like to add some things or get some clarification. And maybe I just didn't write it down correctly. I'm not sure.
No, Gary, I'm happy to do it again. It's to recommend to the board to approve direction to the roundtable to pay the full amount of the legal bills that will be presented via the Citizens Association Ad Hoc Committee to the Roundtable Ad Hoc Committee. So that's the first part. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So that would that include the investigation costs as well, I presume?
Andy or Chappie?
And I'm gonna jump in because Nisa was not present during that part of the closed motion. That was agreed upon to include those bills.
Okay.
And Mayor, if I may make a friendly suggestion to the motion. Could we just specify the time period for these bills if they are only 2020 and 2021, or if we are anticipating that there may have even been bills prior to last calendar year. Thank you.
Excellent,
No,
excellent
great
suggestion.
clarification. Yep, I don't have the answer either. President Sayok, do you have is it just going back to January 2021?
Actually, that Andy is going to be putting things together. So we will go call through the bills and clarify and put that all in the package. If that's okay with everyone. I don't have the answer either. Andy?
And also there was a motion by the board in January for any time spent by staff of the cities association on roundtable matters that the roundtable be billed. So it would be from January forward, but and then the audit and just also to confuse things for you, I think that some of your questions also had been because the audit had asked for cost recovery, and the audit had made the recommendation that any time be billed.
Okay, so then if I understand this correctly, and Gary, please correct me, that bills that are specific to roundtable, we are recommending that they be forwarded to the roundtable. I hope I clarified.
That's the motion as I understand it.
Okay,
That includes staff costs, investigation costs, and legal costs.
correct.
Is that correct?
Correct. Okay, so are there any questions to that? So let's call a vote on that. And so Auden, if you wouldn't mind.
Do we need to take comment on that?
Oh, yes. Well, actually, no, we've already opened public comment and we've closed public testimony. So thank you
Yes.
for that question, but no, we are good now. And
Okay.
so Auden, if you can call it.
I'm Abihoga.
Hi.
Abihoga, I. Sayak.
Aye.
Sayak, I. Jones.
Aye.
Jones, I. Constantine.
Aye.
Constantine, I. Klein.
Aye.
Klein, I. And Flagger.
Yes.
Flagger, I. And the motion passes unanimously.
Okay. And then, thank you very much. And I know Mayor Klein has to leave at 5, so I'm trying to wrap up some decisions that I purposely need guidance for. We need clarification on the remainder of Gary's time and our policy direction on how he will spend his time. Because
Hey.
right now, again, Gary, is that okay? If we-
I'm sorry. Yes, I thought we were talking about my bill, which is uncomfortable, but I will talk about it when you're ready.
Yes. And actually, let's go ahead and talk about that. Let's make you uncomfortable.
Okay, I'm feeling comfortable. I'm sorry to have to talk about my own bill, but I have provided Andy with a copy of the bill. It is public record. I treated the bill the same way that Kirsten Powell has been doing, which is to provide bills with very, very limited information, while my regular billing, and Andy can attest to that, is extremely detailed because I assumed it would become a public record. So I have no problem and would encourage that being provided to the roundtable. That said, the first response is going to be, why isn't there more detail here? Well, I'm doing the same thing that their attorney is and providing us, and I don't know that I can provide too much more than what's there. So, and what's on the agenda was on the consent is to pay my bill, not to deal with the reimbursement, and I would appreciate it if that was addressed.
Okay. And so again, so any questions on that? Seeing no questions, can I please have a motion to pay Gary?
So moved.
Okay, a motion by Vice Mayor
Thank you.
Jones. A second.
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 I was
Okay,
gonna say, if there was no motion or a second, does that mean we don't have to pay him?
There
Mayor,
you go.
so Auden, if you wouldn't mind calling that question.
Yes, and we have a member of the public raising their hand. Should we take that now?
Actually, yeah, let's go ahead and take it just because I'm looking to Gary and to Laurel. I had opened it up, but I didn't specify. So do I need to open it back up?
You can, but maybe just limit it to 1 minute so we can, because we're 1 hour past our deadline.
Yes, okay, so if I can, Mary Lynn, if Councilmember Bernald.
It was an item that I pulled on consent, so it should have gone to public comment. And I still do not have justification for why this is being billed to us if it is in fact something that was raised through one of your members. But go ahead and vote on it. I want to don't take up any more time.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of Councilmember Bernald? Okay, so I'm closing public comment, bringing it back to the board. And if there's any conversation, discussion, and again, let's
if I may, Chair, do we have to have concurrence with an entity to bill them?
I don't believe so, but Andy can respond.
I see lots of heads shaking, so I was going to say, yeah, I don't think we have to have an agreement from to that we're billing agree to the bill. Just as long as we show proof that they owe the money, and we'll let the ad hoc committee work through that. But I guess I was a little confused at that comment. So, but thank you, Chair.
Okay, and so Auden, if we can call the question.
Okay, Sayak,
Yes.
Sayak, I, Constantine,
Aye.
Constantine, I, Abakoga,
I,
Abakoga, I, Jones,
Aye.
Jones, I, Fliger,
Yes.
Fliger, I, and Klein.
Aye.
Klein, I, 6 ayes, the motion carries.
Okay. And then I do want to make a decision on next week's board meeting. So we definitely have to bring to the board our budgetary situation. We have the recommendations on how to on submitting the bills. There is discussion on whether or not we have an ad hoc update. There is a sense of urgency, but there also, I see both sides, right? Of having a full discussion by the executive board of what our options are in September. So where's everyone feeling? It looks like August and September will become a roundtable discussion again. And so Mayor Constantine?
So Chair, I remember we had a discussion. I'm not remembering if it was the last executive board meeting, if it was last regular meeting, but we discussed that this meeting upcoming would either start early at 6 o'clock and we wouldn't have a legislative action committee meeting, or are we planning on starting at the same time? Because I do know that we talked about this would probably take up a lot of airtime.
Right. Right now, what I have talked about with Andy is that this be the only agenda item, should it start at 7? Because I agree with you, it will take up a lot of airtime. And I think just look at ourselves. So this is all we discussed in 2 hours.
Right.
So I think it's worthwhile. Does anyone think we need to use the 6 o'clock hour? I don't plan on putting anything else on the agenda.
Okay, thank you,
Okay.
Chair.
So Mayor Fliker?
I'm going to defer to the ad hoc committee, Chappie and Larry, to let us know if they'll be ready in August or if they prefer to have the benefit of vetting it with the executive committee first. I do understand the urgency. And so if they're ready in August, I think it's best for us to just bring it to the board in August. But I wouldn't want them to be put on the spot if they prefer. That's the whole point of the executive committee, right? To have that kind of dialogue and recommendation coming out of the executive team. But I defer to them. If they're ready in August, I do think it's urgent and an answer that we need to address.
And by putting it on August, I do want to add to the mayor's point, there will be no executive board recommendation. It's going to be a discussion. And so those are the pros and cons. So anyone else want to share their August or September? Councilmember Abikoga.
So as much as I'd like for us as an e-board to look at it, I think having it all in one package for the board is probably more important because I think there's so much interrelationship with our finances and whatnot. So, I mean, I would have liked to seen it just because I was hoping, we could be in alignment with our ad hoc committee, but I'm going to trust that we will on the whole be, and, say, why don't we just go ahead and move forward with it?
And so if I don't see anyone dissenting, we'll go ahead and agendize this for next Thursday. And just so that we're clear, I think I will work with Andy and Gary to again include the broad spectrum of what we agendized today so that we don't limit our conversation. And I think let's just make sure we're in agreement with our what we think will happen. We will have a full conversation on how bills will be sent. I think we need to have a conversation on, having an update. And then as in the staff report, there are several financial conversations we need to have of how to move forward, given our limited budget and where Gary and Andy, frankly, need to be spending their time, because we're now in August and we need to finish our JPA. I'm determined to finish that this year. Andy.
I just wanted to make sure that after you went through that agenda, that everyone wanted 7 o'clock was still good with everyone.
Does anyone feel a need to start at 6?
No.
Okay.
I would just say, as long as we're sure that we can end by 9.
Rich, we've been talking about this forever. Okay, so again, on the agenda today, is there anything, we put a lot on the staff report, including other options. And so is there anything else that anyone would like to put on there? It's 5:02. We've made some decisions, and it looks like we're going to continue the conversation for next. Andy and Gary and Laurel, am I forgetting anything else on today's agenda before?
This may be obvious, but there was a motion that was passed by Mayor Fliger that does go to the full board, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, sorry, I just not so sure of our process just yet.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. Okay, and again, any other items? Okay, well then I thank everyone for their time. It's 5:03. I will see
Thank you.
everyone next Thursday.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Have a good weekend.
You too.